This will be a fairly quick webinar, should only be lasting about 30 minutes, and we're going to be covering beyond generative AI. So thank you for joining, and today is really about widening the lens. Generative AI has dominated the conversation because it is visible and it's easy to demo and it has given instant results. But if we keep focusing only at the layer that generative AI is on, we will miss what will actually define the late 2020s in terms of emerging technologies. And this is systems that take actions, systems that connect to the physical world we actually live in, and then systems that really need to be supported by much stronger trust and security foundations than most organizations have available to them now. The purpose of this webinar is simple. I just want to give you guys a practical map of the technologies that are likely to shape the next 5 years, explain why they matter, and most importantly, translate them into what you should do now or what should you be looking out for now, whether you're building a career in analytics or trying to future-proof a team or a work team. I'm going to do this in three stages. First, I'm going to talk about the core shift that is already happening in technology, from answers to actions. Then I'm going to talk about the main technology domains you want to look at that will define the late 2020s beyond generative AI. And then thirdly, I'm going to talk about a quick, clear set of practical actions, what to pilot, what to learn, and what to watch going forward. So let's start with the core shift that is defining this entire webinar. So a useful way to think about generative AI is that it made knowledge and content low friction. And what I mean by this is you can ask for a draft, a summary, a plan, and you get something instantly. And this is why it spreads so quickly, because it's so tangible and so easy to use. But the bigger shift is not better text. It's better execution, and that's the phase of AI that we are entering now. In other words, we're moving systems from answering questions to systems that can complete work end to end. This might look like pulling data from a dashboard, validating it, and drafting a weekly update without human input, and then routing it for approval, and then logging what happened, and then scheduling the next run. This should all be run by an AI in about 5 years' time if the organization needs it. The value is not words or even actionable answers. It's the workflows being completed end to end, and that's the next phase of AI that we're walking into. So this is kind of where the constraints of AI will change. When you generate content, the downside is usually embarrassment or misinformation. But when you take actions, the downside becomes actual operational risk for companies. Monies can be moved, access can be granted, and records can be changed. So when messages are sent and they're not authorized and they're sent by AI and something is wrong, the risk is huge. So these actions will need accountability. And this touches on something called AI sovereignty. So in the late 2020s, it's not just an AI conversation. It's going to become a conversation about the governance and security convention around AI agents. Big organizations will have hundreds to thousands of AI agents as quasi-employees, and we will really need to confirm and put legislation around how these companies react when their agents do something wrong, when they break the law, or when they lead to huge operational losses. A major strategic trend reporting is already bundling these themes together. Multi-agent systems, physical AI, AI security platforms, and digital provenance are being treated as connected priorities rather than separate tasks or separate topics. So the key line I want you to hold on to in this is in the late 2020s, competitive advantage for organizations is not about who will have the cleverest model. It's who can safely design a systems of action, who can safely design a model that can complete tasks end to end. And we need to make this tangible. We need to fully understand what I am saying. So here's a simple map that you can reuse for the rest of the talk. So this is the map, and there's four layers that reinforce each other, all talking about emerging tech that's coming out soon. At the top layer, this layer is called the orchestration layer, and this is where agents live. And by agents, I mean AI agents. This is about workflow automation, tool calling, multi-agent systems, and the software layer that turns AI capability into something that can actually run inside a business. Then there's the reality layer. This is where we actually live. This is where the AI moves beyond screens and into the physical world as per se. This could be through robotics, sensors, spatial computing, and systems that interpret real environments rather than just databases and tables. Sitting under that sits the infrastructure layer. This is where essentially economics, transactions, and performances live. This is talking about edge AI, hybrid computing, specialized chips, and platforms that make AI scalable, affordable, and reliable across different environments. And finally, probably most importantly, but probably also the least exciting, is the trust layer. And this is essentially the condition that needs to exist for the adoption of emerging technology. This considers identity, provenance, AI security, and even post-quantum readiness. This layer is often treated as an afterthought, but in practice it will dictate whether any of the other layers can scale upwards. If we get cool new technology operating on a trust layer that is not built up and is not sufficient for the current technologies and risks we have available to us now, they will never succeed and they will always not be able to scale. So if you keep this map in mind, this four-layer map, you'll kind of avoid essentially a buzzword soup where different words are just being shouted at you. And it's a really good way to picture four layers of emerging technology that will affect your lives and your workplace in the next 5 years. Every trend will become easier to evaluate with this map because you ask two questions. Firstly, which layer is this trend in? Is it in the orchestration layer or is it in the trust layer, etc.? And what is the constraints that will slow this trait or trend down? Usually the constraint is not the model, it's how fast and how easily it can be integrated into where it needs to be, the data quality it comes with, and the questions of permissions or trust that it comes with. So let's firstly start at the orchestration layer, because this is where the most visible shift beyond generative AI is happening. So let's talk about agents and multi-agent systems. When people say agents, especially in the tech sense and the analytical sense, they often mean different things depending on the person. So it's important that we define things simply. Firstly, a co-pilot helps you do work inside of a tool, but an agent takes a goal, plans steps, uses tools, and returns an outcome. This is a major jump because it turns AI into a workflow participant rather than just a writing assistant. Then there is the idea of multi-agent systems. Instead of one system trying to do everything, you can have specialized agents coordinating like a small team. One agent may be specialized to gather information, another runs analysis, another drafts a response, and another reviews for risk, and then another handles formatting and delivery. If these are all AI agents, this would be called a multi-agent team. This structure tends to be a lot more robust because it mirrors how organizations are already dividing work in the real world. What matters in practice is that agents fail for boring reasons. They fail because permissions are wrong, the underlying systems are messy, the data definitions are unclear, or the objective is ambiguous. So the organizations that succeed are not the ones that who simply adopt the best agent product or best multi-agent system. They're the ones who design the workflow properly, define guardrails, and build auditability so that they can hold themselves accountable and incrementally adjust their processes. A statistic that captures the expected pace here from Gartner, which predicts that by 2026, this year, about 40% of enterprise applications will include task-specific AI agents, up from under 5% by the end of 2025. Whether this exact 40% number lands or not, the signal is very clear. This is expected to spread quickly and it will become a standard feature of enterprise software. So if you're thinking practically about where to pilot agents, you want bounded workflows with clear success criteria and reversible actions. Reporting packs, triage, routing, knowledge-based maintenance, or internal support automation. These are the kind of places where the value is real and the risk is manageable. If you want one example that forces everyone to understand why trust and permissions matter, it's probably the AI applications in commerce. So agentic commerce is a new technology that's likely to roll out in the next couple of years, and it's the perfect case study because it makes the abstract concept of AI agents a bit more concrete. So when an agent can browse, compare, and purchase on your behalf without your input, suddenly you have to answer questions like, what is it allowed to spend? How does it authenticate the payments? How does it avoid fraud? And how does it handle returns or refunds? Who is liable if it makes the wrong choice? Is it the company that built the AI agent? Is it the websites you're shopping on? Or is it the user using the AI agent? And how do you prove what happened? How do you prove it was an AI agent making the purchase, not you just making a purchase that you regret? What's important is that it's not a futuristic concept anymore. Large payment networks and major platforms are actively shaping standards and partnerships for AI-driven commerce. Majority of this being Amazon, who has sued Perplexity and other organizations for running their own AI agents on Amazon software. The messaging is consistent. Trust is the product. Without trust, consumers will not delegate to AI agents, and without delegation, the market will not scale. The reason this matters is because it mirrors what will happen in many business functions. Finance approvals, procurement, HR processes, customer refunds, etc. If you allow automated actions, you must design permissions, approvals, and audit trails that are strong enough for real-world consequences. So the key takeaway is not that agents will shop for us, although there's a strong possibility that they may happen. It's that agentic systems push organizations and will push you as workers within organizations to build their own reliable, transparent trust stack. Because delegated action is only possible when identity and governance in that organization are strong. So now let's move to the reality layer, and this is where AI begins to merge with physical systems and where stakes become even higher. So physical AI is a phrase becoming increasingly more used to describe AI systems that operate in the physical world. It's a shift away from robotics as a rigid, rule-based machines in a controlled environment and towards robots that can adapt, perceive, and operate in messier, real settings. Historically, robots were the most successful in high volume, predictable manufacturing. Physical AI broadens this hugely into logistics, healthcare, support environment, agriculture, and other domains where the environment is less controlled and the tasks are more varied. If you want an example of this, think about just self-driving cars. This is a highly variable environment where AI is expected to roll out and be actually successful on the consumer side in the next few years. This is much more difficult than manufacturing because there are many scenarios that require instantaneous decision making and adjustment by a self-driving AI system. What is driving physical AI is the combination of having better sensors, better computational power, better models, and better simulation abilities. But it's crucial to be honest about the constraints that are in place. In physical environments, errors come at a huge cost, sometimes even lives in the case of self-driving cars. A wrong prediction is not just a wrong answer, like it is inside a system or when you're working with ChatGPT. It can become a safety incident, a liability issue, or an operational failure. So again, and you'll sense a theme here, but the winners in this space will not just be the module builders. It will be the organizations that are safely engineering robust monitoring and human override systems so that they can have incident response maturity and strong operational controls over their physical AI. From a data careers perspective, this is one of the reasons the late 2020s will blur job boundaries quite heavily. Data engineering, risk, and governance will become more connected because physical AI will demand reliability, not just capability. To make physical AI viable at scale, the next issue becomes where computation happens and how you manage it economically. So similar to physical AI is edge AI. Edge AI, a step up from edge computing, is when you move computation to where data is generated, rather than sending everything back to the cloud for processing and then sending it onto systems. The reason edge AI matters is because the world produces way too much data to centralize it all cheaply. And many decisions are very time sensitive. Think again back to self-driving cars. If there are manufacturing anomalies or safety monitoring anomalies, fleet systems, or retail analytics, think about fraud signals, even smart buildings. Latency matters, bandwidth will matter, especially the cost, and the privacy constraints will matter. So in the late 2020s, the pattern for using this data is going to be hybrid. The cloud will remain powerful for training, heavy analytics, and central governance, but the edge where systems actually operate will become critical for real-time inference, resilience, and privacy-aware processing. And a really exciting example of this is processing on satellites called Satellites First AI. This is when satellites will take geospatial data about the world, such as climate data or logistics data, and process the data on the satellite, then sending only relevant information to where it matters. This is a really exciting concept for such as disaster response that needs instantaneous monitoring and instantaneous pings, and climate response, such as hurricane responses in the United States. Also, for logistics, if it can spot a blocked ship, such as what happened in the Suez Canal a few years ago, this is really important, and sending that ping out will save organizations a lot of money. The architecture that will win with Edge AI is one that connects them cleanly with consistent monitoring and governance rather than a pile of disconnected local systems. One of the strongest signals that is that this is a real investment wave comes from IDC forecasting, which estimates the global spend on edge computing will rise towards $380 billion by 2028. Again, the exact numbers may not be entirely accurate in the end, but it states a clear direction. And that is because the edge is becoming a major budget line, not just a niche technology. The risk here is also worth stating. Introduces a lot of complexity where it didn't exist already. There'll be problems such as device sprawl, patch management, even stuff such as model drift. The advantage will sit with teams who treat Edge as an engineering discipline, not a prototype. So once you have the sensors and the computational power in place, the next multiplier is the ability to simulate and test decisions before you deploy them. So this is a really interesting and exciting technology that I really feel doesn't get talked about enough. It's very linked to my own interests. I'm very interested in reinforcement learning and the ability to teach agents and teach simulations without human input. So we're talking about digital twins and simulation here. A digital twin is a digital representation of a real asset, process, or system fed by data. The concept has been around for a while, but it's become a lot more powerful when you combine three things that are becoming readily available. And that's better instrumentation, better pipelines, and AI that can interpret and act on the outputs. The promise of digital twins is not just a nice visual model. It's a test environment for decisions. You can run scenarios, stress test capability, predict failures, and optimize performance without experimenting directly on real-world expensive systems. This becomes valuable in very practical ways, such as predictive maintenance to reduce downside, energy optimization in buildings, and supply chain resilience, to say a few. Often the highest value use cases aren't going to be very flashy, but they are the ones that will reduce huge production and operational costs and risk in a quiet manner. McKinsey has estimated that the rapid growth in the digital twin market will happen, with projections pointing to tens of billions of value by the later 2020s. And even if you ignore this forecast itself, the point is the same. Simulation and operational modeling are moving from niche engineering again to business adoption as we get better technology and better resilience. These technologies will save a ton of money. Just imagine self-driving cars as an example. If we can simulate driving procedures in busy environments or in random environments, we will see how systems react to traffic or to outliers before testing it in practice. If we can't simulate this and we only test in practice, we risk ruining cars and very expensive AI systems before they are fully produced. There are a lot of constraints for digital twins. However, a twin is really only as good as the instrumentation used to build it and the assumptions used to build it. So without reliable data and clear definitions, you can only produce outputs that look precise whilst they are also going to be wrong. This is a major risk in the late 2020s because people will trust simulation outputs more than they should. A lot more scrutiny should be put onto how good and how reliable the data that these outputs and simulations and twins are built on matter. All of this brings us to the trust layer, and this is the real layer that really matters. Because if you cannot trust identities, content, and actions, then the adoption of these new technologies will stall. So, as generative systems are improving, the cost of impersonation is collapsing hugely. You may have seen this recently on Twitter with Elon Musk's platform and his AI Grok coming under fire hugely with the whole scandal about it being able to very easily generate deep fakes of other people. And as generative systems improve, as the cost of impersonation collapses, this is the simplest way to describe the trust crisis that will become the late 2020s. This isn't just about viral videos like that's deep fakes made. It's also going to be about fraud, social engineering, and it's the kind of industrial scaling of deception. Stuff and outputs such as voice cloning, deepfake videos, synthetic documents, automated phishing, and realistic business email compromises will define the problems in the next decade. The key shift is that attackers will scale both with volume and plausibility. There are very credible signals that this is already accelerating. The World Economic Forum has highlighted a sharp growth in deepfake related fraud in recent years. In the UK, the UK industry is already citing that UK China shows fraud volumes and losses rising, with criminals increasingly using AI to scale attacks. These are not edge cases, they're signs of a broader problem, and it's really important that you keep an eye out and become cybersecurity aware yourselves. In the late 2020s, the trust stack will be shaped by a hard lesson. Detection alone is not enough. As fakes improve, you will also need a verification, provenance, and strong identity systems. In other words, we need to move from spot the fake to proving what is real. And this is why we see digital provenance and AI security platforms being treated as strategic priorities. This is why identity needs to improve, because identity is the gateway to permissions and delegated action. So on the topic of identity, there's a shift happening with security around identity. And this is mostly to do with passwords. Passwords are by far one of the weakest links in modern digital systems. They are easy to steal, easy to reuse, easy to phish, and as AI scales towards social engineering, password-based systems become even more brittle and unreliable. Passkeys are one of the clearest examples of a foundational shift that will enable the late 2020s. They are based on cryptographic keys rather than shared secrets. So in plain English, they make phishing dramatically harder because there's no password to hand over. This matters for two main reasons. Firstly, it reduces account takeover and fraud, which is already growing in AI-assisted forms. And secondly, it enables delegation. If you want agents to act on your behalf, identity cannot be a weak link as it risks huge operational losses from hacking. Adoption is also not hypothetical. Industry index data from the FIDO Alliance suggests very strong user opt-in expectations once passkeys are offered, with most users willing to adopt when prompted. Large platforms are deploying passkeys at scales, which signals maturity. This is something that you will very realistically be working with and around. You'll very likely not have your own business passwords in the coming future. You're likely just to have passkeys. If you work in analytics, it's worth recognizing that identity is not just an IT issue. It will affect data access, governance, and the ability to automate safely. Strong identity reduces friction and it reduces risk, and it also makes the safe automation of AI agents a lot easier. So identity is one part of the trust layer, but the next layer is cryptographic readiness for the longer term. And by longer term, we mean much longer term here. So post-quantum migration. So computing often gets framed in very dramatic terms, but the practical reason it matters is simple. Much of today's public key cryptography could be vulnerable if um, capable quantum systems arrive. And even before that point, there is a risk known as harvest now, decrypt later, where data is stolen today that could be decrypted in the future. This is happening very often with very expensive cryptocurrency wallets, for example, where they are being stolen now, even though that they are fully encrypted, with plans to decrypt them later when the hackers have quantum computing processors. The key is for the late 2020s is simple and it is not panic. There is still a large lead time. Cryptography missions and migrations are slow because the systems are very complex and dependencies are very messy. And vendors will all be moving at different speeds. So readiness is mostly about planning, not prophecy. Quantum is going to take a long while for it to properly integrate into technology. So we just need to be ready for that to happen. There are two concrete signals that make this a real agenda item, in my opinion. First, the NIST finalized its first set of post-quantum cryptography standards in 2024. This gives the industry something stable to align to. And second, the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre has published guidance on preparing for post-quantum cryptography, framing it as a structured program rather than a speculative risk. So, what does quantum readiness mean in practice? It means knowing where cryptography is used in your environment, which systems carry long life sensitive data, and whether your vendors should have a roadmap. It also means building crypto agility, the ability to swap algorithms without rebuilding everything from scratch. Now, I want to land this whole talk in actions because as we have four trends, we need something. The four trends by themselves are interesting, but they're not useful. We need to be able to shape these trends and shape these layers in a way that we can act on them and prepare now. Oh. So here are the actions that make the late 2020s feel manageable rather than overwhelming. And I'm going to group them again into three themes. This is build, orchestrate, and protect. First, you need to build foundations. If you want all agents and automation to work, you need reliable data. That means clearly defined metrics, lineage, and monitoring. It means pipelines that are observable, not just functioning. It also means designing for hybrid environments because in the late 2020s, systems will not live purely in the cloud. There will be edge AI and edge computing. Secondly, now you want to orchestrate carefully. You want to pilot agents on bounded workflows with clear success criterias. You want to pick processes where actions are reversible and the approval checkpoints are very easy to insert and make. You want to design explicit permissions and build auditability from day one so that you are accountable for the actions of your agents. The biggest organizational failures, and I'm sure there will be failures worth many, many billions of dollars in the coming years, will come from not models, but they'll come from weak controls and weak and unclear responsibility and accountability. And thirdly, we really need to protect trust. And trust is so important with future technology. You need to be able to strengthen your identity and passwordless programs. You need to plan for provenance, plan for verification in a world full of synthetic content. You really need to think about investing in AI security approaches that treat models and agents as part of your attack surface. And you need to build a post-quantum readiness plan so that you're not forced into a rushed migration later. I do talk about quantum a fair bit. It is a very real security risk in the next decade. However, in the next 5 years, it may be a bit more unlikely to actually take impact and integrate into businesses. From a career angle, it helps to remember that the skills mixes are shifting. The World Economic Forum has reported that employers expect a large portion of workers' core skills to change by 2030. The implication is that continuous learning is not a slogan, as the IOA has told many times and we preach a lot. It is a career strategy that is mandatory for analysts entering the workplace. But the late 2020s twist is that most valuable skills are not just using AI tools, they are designing reliable systems, understanding data and risk, and communicating decisions clearly. There is a large emphasis on your soft skills and your ability to understand professionalism and legislation in the next 5 years. So if you take one practical personal action from this and from this talk, it's this. You need to build a portfolio of evidence that you can work with messy data, that you can automate responsibility, and you can explain trade-offs clearly. Use the IOA portfolio to build this and use our content to learn about all of these factors. We have a lot of content here available for you. This portfolio will stay valuable no matter which trend accelerates first and will hugely help you getting a job and moving within your career upwards in the next 5 years. I'm just going to close with a very short summary of what's happened in this webinar and what I've covered. And then if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask in the chats. So let me close with 3 main takeaways. Firstly, generative AI is the interface layer. It's not the entire shift in the next 5 years. It's how people see AI, but it's not where the hardest problems sit. Secondly, in the late 2020s, it's going to be shaped by systems that can act, not just answer. It's going to be shaped by physical AI, hybrid compute, and digital twins. But all of those depend on trust. Identity, provenance, AI security, and long-term cryptography readiness are not optional extras. They are the conditions for these technologies to scale in organizations. And thirdly, the most sensible action plan for you and also for organizations is to build strong foundations, orchestrate agents within bounded workflows, and protect trust early. I mean, breaking governance as opposed to breaking the law is always more expensive than building it into your systems when you're planning.
Thank you for watching. The Institute of Analytics is the global membership body for data professionals. Learn more by following us on LinkedIn, Facebook or Instagram, or visit our website now. The links are in the description.